Thought we did. There we are.
All right.
Good morning and Happy New Year. I'd like to call the January 6, 2015 City Council meeting to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Bush.
Here.
Soldner.
Here.
Hyros de Carvalho.
Here.
Dave Line.
Here.
Prowett.
Here.
Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And this morning's prayer will be given by John Carney. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Council. And Happy New Year to everyone. Let's pray. Gracious Father, we thank you, Lord, for this day that you have created and have allowed us to share in together, to conduct business, Lord, to share in fellowship, to share in working together and serving together in this room and also in this community. And we thank you, Father, for the community in which you have placed us and for these leaders in which you have given to us and for the workers that, Lord, you have placed around us. And we pray and lift each one to you today, asking, God, your hand upon them, give them guidance and counsel as they begin this new year. Father, we can't look into the future and know what's to happen this year, but Father, we can put our faith and our trust in you and know that, God, that you are in control of all things. And in this, we give you praise, honor, and glory. For it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. All right, this is the point in the meeting where we take communications from the audience. If there is anyone in the audience that would like to address the council on an issue that is not on the agenda, we'd ask that you come to the podium, state your name and address, and please limit your remarks to no more than 5 minutes. Do we have anyone that would like to address the council? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the next item?
Item 5A through L, consent agenda.
I'll make a motion we approve the consent agenda as presented by staff.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Bush.
Yes.
Soldner.
Yes.
Hyros de Carvalho.
Yes.
Dave Line.
Yes.
Prowett.
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 6A, consider resolution for fiscal year 2014 waiver of gap requirements.
Good morning, Frank Edwards, Finance Director for the City of Hutch. Each year we bring this resolution before you. It's a waiver that's allowed by the Kansas Board of Accountancy for us to not comply with generally accepted accounting principles, but adopt and adhere to the Kansas statutory basis, which is basically a cash basis of accounting. This requires the adoption of a resolution to do that. It is the opinion of staff that it is more expensive to comply with GAAP than cash basis, and also that cash basis is more understandable to the average citizen. So the staff would recommend that we again adopt a resolution allowing us to continue with cash basis of accounting.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have any questions for Frank? Or do we have a motion?
I would move to approve the resolution for fiscal year 2014 waiver of GAAP requirements.
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Bush.
Yes.
Soldner.
Yes.
Hyros de Carvalho.
Yes.
Dave Line.
Yes.
Prowett.
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 6B, consider resolution appropriating funds to pay payrolls and claims for 2015.
Back in August 19th, the council did adopt the 2015 operating and capital budgets for us to conduct, and we did this by conducting a public hearing as well. The city has policies and practices and internal controls in place that allows us to pay bills on a timely basis. And this includes providing to the council a detailed list of expenditures, paying our vendors weekly, To do this and continue this practice, a resolution is required so that we may pay bills weekly and proceed with the payment of claims such as payroll and any other bills that come due. In order to do this, the resolution attached is required to be adopted by the council. And the staff does recommend we continue this practice.
I'll move to approve the resolution as presented by staff.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Bush.
Yes.
Soldner.
Yes.
Pyros de Carvalho.
Yes.
Dave Line.
Yes.
Crowett.
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 7A, consider sports arena sales tax proposition.
Mayor and Council, today's discussion is really a follow-up from our December 16th meeting where you heard the presentation on the proposed renovations, improvements to the sports arena. And as you heard on the December 16th meeting, the steering committee, asked the city council to consider the presenting to the voters the question of a sales tax amount to fund the proposed improvements. At the time, we talked about roughly a 0.35% increase in sales tax, and those are some details that we'll continue to work on. In order for us to meet all of the requirements and the timelines in order to place this on the April ballot, the council would need to take action on January 20th that would actually approve an ordinance or that would spell out the exact language in the ballot, the exact percentage of sales tax increase that we would be looking at. So there are a couple things that really wanted to follow up today on just to make sure we get clear direction from the council as we begin preparing that legislation. We've already worked some on that, but have some details to go on that. First of all is the amount, the 0.35% that was recommended by the committee. Working with our financial folks, that amount would appear to be able to cover the proposed $29+ million project in 10 years or less, would also provide adequate debt coverage. And one of the things we talked about too is the establishment of a maintenance fund and a percentage of the sales tax receipts that would go into a maintenance fund to be used for the sports arena as we go forward. In terms of how much that would be, anywhere from 5 to 10%, that's something that we'll want to work on over the next couple of weeks. And so I don't know if there's some other issues that the council would have, but I think today's discussion is really just to get some specific direction so that we can prepare the necessary language in the ordinance to present to you on January 20th. And certainly on January 20th, we could tweak that depending upon what you see or as we prepare that for you. So right now, I'd just like to kind of open it up for any additional comments that you guys might have as kind of a follow-up to our meeting last month, and we can hopefully get some direction to move forward.
John, would that maintenance fund cover increases in operational expenses or just like major things like the boiler?
Yeah, the idea would be major, and the way the ballot question would read is just to set aside a maintenance fund, and how you define that's something we want to talk about, but I wouldn't anticipate that would be used for annual utility costs or things like that. It would be more for replacement of the gym floor down the road or roof replacement, things that really may not get touched during this renovation. And right now that's probably been one of the challenges. And when you look at the arena, there are a lot of things that probably should have been dealt with over the years, but as we get into our annual budget process and big ticket items come up, it's easy to defer those for another year. And so the idea of this maintenance fund would be that we wouldn't have to fight for every dollar during a budget to repair something that needs to be repaired at that time. And certainly that would be the responsibility of this council, future councils, and management to ensure that those funds are spent as they're set aside for.
So, John, in terms of the oversight of the maintenance fund, that would continue to be a responsibility of the city, not necessarily the community college?
That is correct. We would, and that's really the way it's set up
Is that the way it's
today.
set up now? All
You know,
right.
the college and the city's relationship is really on an operational side, but anytime there's a major improvement needed at the arena, roof replacement, boiler, major repair, those types of things, that is a
That's
city
coming out of here.
responsibility.
Okay.
Have any numbers been put together for the increase in utilities with the additional space?
We are currently we've requested that, have not received that from our architectural team, just to try to give us an idea, and I think they'll be able to do that based on industry standards with the additional square footage that we're adding, plus the idea of air conditioning a facility and what that might do. And that will be, a fairly significant increase, no doubt, depending upon the usage. And that question's come up, and that is something that Dr. File and I have talked about, that would continue to be the responsibility of the city and the college through our operational agreement on an annual basis. We will pay that. So there will be, and we want to be clear about that, there will be some additional cost in our annual budgets for the sports arena if this project would happen. It's not going to be just out of this world type,
Yeah.
but there will be some increased costs. As far as additional personnel, of course, that's the college folks that basically maintain that. I don't know what that's going to entail. I don't think that will be a large amount either, but there will be some numbers there.
Thank you.
With this maintenance fund, so, because this is something I hadn't really thought about till I read this, so I've got some questions. So a percentage of the sales tax collected would go into this maintenance fund?
Correct.
So basically, it would be accrued annually?
Correct.
And does it build up to a certain dollar amount, or is it just a percentage until the bond is over?
That's a
and
good, and good question. We haven't kind of flushed that out. I mean, one of the things that I'm looking at here was a 5% maintenance fund. And the way our financial person put this out is that we would collect that in the first 3 years, so it would accumulate to about $1.5 million. I had originally thought that would be just an annual accumulation, and because I don't know that there's any reason we would need it up front, that much up front, but over time. So that will be something that we'll want to flush out and maybe show that as annually there's whatever percent we come up with goes into this fund.
I like the idea of a maintenance fund. I wish we had one for Memorial
Other
Hall.
things.
But so then.
So then how do you
So then
replenish
is
it?
just real quick,
Yeah,
so then if
yeah.
it's 29 million, is it 29 million plus 1.5? The maintenance fund is in addition to the 29 million that's been presented by the committee, or is that 1.5 part of the 29 million?
It would be, actually, I guess it would be an addition, yeah.
So really, we're talking about 30.5.
Yeah, the way I would look at it is that the sales tax will take, if we set 1.5 million, it would take that much more longer for the sales tax to be on the book to collect all of that. The
Right.
project still would be limited to whatever we limit it to. But the idea of this is, once we set this up, we could go no longer than 10 years on this sales tax, but the hope is that that the revenue is going to come in to pay those bonds off early.
Right.
So,
It's always the hope.
right.
Right. And then with the maintenance fund, I guess I would also just, encourage you to really look at some strong wording for future councils related to, the physical plant. Because I would hate to see those dollars being used in the future for utilities or personnel or, funding special events,
Correct.
that would potentially bring in more revenue. And I guess the other thing is, I appreciate that you don't have the numbers and you're kind of guessing, but, you're talking about cooling a building that size in the middle of July and August in Kansas. I think you might have some significant bills there that would play out.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, you said that you didn't think they'd be significant. I think they
Well,
might
it
be
depends on how you
significant.
define significant.
Well,
But yeah, it would,
well, I guess we're talking about 1.5 million, like just part of a little set-aside fund. So I guess I have a different definition of significant. But I guess that makes me very cautious, given the budget environment that we have and given that what we're looking at. Stepping aside from the fund, so there's a decision point here about 0.35 or 0.40 for the sales tax, and is that something you want council to direct you on today, or is that something you're going to come back with a proposal the council, or what are your thoughts with that difference?
Our proposal, and this is, with committee discussion and even at the staff level, is the .35. There was strong sentiment that we keep it to that, and, the early questions was, would that be enough to generate enough money to fund the project? And so we started out at, the .40 and looked at .35. We looked at, I think there was another scenario of .75 that would pay it off in, 3 or 4 years kind of thing. So,
But
so
you're looking
that will be the recommendation, .35.
at .35. Good.
Right.
And I like it as low as it could be.
I know the committee did a great job with this and delved far deeper than we have, and we've delved pretty deep. But I'm curious if there was ever any conversation about perhaps doing part of it and then doing a higher sales tax maybe after the jail sales tax sunsetted or sunset. Was that ever part of the conversation? Or
And I do want to say, Bob Fee is here in the audience representing the steering committee in case there's any questions that I can't handle, and I'll bring in my A-team. But there were a lot of discussions about phasing, about property tax funding sources. And I think the phasing option just didn't ever really work because, the project is in really 3 pieces you can look at. The south end, which really kind of address some of the NJCAA needs and college as well. The north end, more so the college and the community. And then the middle part, which is kind of both sides, it just was hard to slice that into pieces. And I think after a lot of discussion, the committee just determined that, let's do it all together if we truly want to impact all the different groups. And we're talking about the community college, the NJCAA group, as well as the community at large. I don't know if I addressed that.
No, I think you did. It's just that's a lot of the feedback that I've received, and I think we're all excited about the potential for this project moving forward. But if I'm receiving that, I'm a little worried about it passing at that level, and if a phase-in is more palatable to the voters. But I know we've had this conversation. If we do only the north end, you end up with, or if you do only the south end, you have no practice gyms, which is kind of a big deal. So, I mean, it's not really, the way it's broken out now, really can't phase it.
I think if we just did the south end, that probably addresses some of the issues that came forth from the NJCAA folks. I mean, it addresses a lot of their issues, not all of them, but more of them. But beyond that, it doesn't really do that much for the community college and their future use, and it really doesn't open the possibilities for additional gym space for the public, Hutch Rec Commission, other entities to use for some of their programs. So
I think that cuts out, without doing that north end and doing it really all at one time, you cut out the ability to bring in maybe those volleyball tournaments, those things that might actually create a little bit of revenue to help offset some of the cost in cooling the place and some of the things that we have done. So without that, you've just cut out any possibilities of bringing additional revenue in.
Who's going to be responsible for soliciting the additional activities? Is that going to fall to the city? Is it going to fall to the Chamber of Commerce? Is it going to fall to the college?
That's a really good question, and there's really no central group. I mean, I think even today, the city's involved with Fun Valley and the Rec Commission with promoting that, and there's a group that does the wrestling, and I think it's a combination of many groups. MAYB is I don't know who in town does that. You've got the soccer groups, and there will not be, to my knowledge, I mean, obviously the CVB, the chamber, the city would be involved in securing, contracts with the NJCAA for additional, national championships, whether it be volleyball or women's basketball or what have you. There would be, some of that there, but I think it's a little bit of everybody that is involved in the various sports.
Okay, it's not another position is where I was headed.
Not in my mind, no.
Okay.
Yeah. And, right now, the way the arena works, the college is the booking agent. But, essentially, you gotta ring the phone to book it. It's not, we don't have people out there trying to bring in, Alice Cooper and groups like that. My
Okay.
age is there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Boy,
Alice Cooper.
Yeah.
interesting that that's what you went to.
Yeah.
Taylor Swift,
The
John.
chickens.
How about the Eagles?
You
Yeah,
might
there-
actually be able to get Alice
Yeah.
Cooper.
Yeah, you might.
There really isn't.
Wow.
Yeah.
Leaving that alone.
Yeah, let's not go there.
So we really don't have that,
Okay.
that organization. It's a lot of different groups working together, I think.
Okay.
Back on the spreadsheet where I think Piper Jaffray prepared this, and I know you've given some input to the projected annual sales growth rate of 2%. Is that an typical historical trend that we have been realizing, 2%? Or to me, that seems fairly conservative.
It is, although.
And I'm okay
I
with
mean,
that of just kind of.
I think average over the years it's been that, but when you go back to 2007, I think prior to that it'd been about that 1 to 2% growth, and then 9 and 10 with the recession we dipped. We dipped
Did we?
probably 2 to 3, so we dipped, and then we picked back up in 11, back to where we were in about 2008, and so we're trending upward, and so yeah, that's I think a fairly conservative number, but don't know that anybody will want to be more aggressive on that. So to me, it seems like a good trend for us.
Okay.
Do we have any further questions?
I had one other thing. It seems like a facility this phenomenal would lend itself well to being a real community asset and hopefully lead to a lot of collaboration between the different entities that have recreational facility or recreational activities. But I know a lot of questions are coming up about how open it will be to the public. I'm not saying we necessarily need to get into that now, but that's a question I think a lot of voters are asking, or at least asking me, the hours. And I know we don't have all of that figured out and when those practice gyms will be, accessible. But I think that's something that the committee or someone needs to start discussing.
And the committee spent a lot of time kind of on that, and community colleges in the room, and because it is important that we're talking that and that be reality. And we talk a lot about the usage patterns, and when the college uses the gym on a Saturday for a game Saturday night, doesn't mean that the new gyms couldn't be used for rec programs all that day, and things like that. And so it's going to take a lot of cooperation and work between the entities to make sure that it isn't that it is open and available for for programming. And one of the things I think we should be upfront about too when we talk about public use, I personally don't envision it being a open gym, just show up and it'll be open, there'll be somebody in there, like a YMCA type thing.
Yeah.
When I talk about public use, and I don't know what everybody else's feeling is on that, it's for programmed at, HRC and YMCA and different groups to utilize the gym or what have you.
Yeah.
Bob Fee, I wondered if we could ask you to come up and maybe give a little bit of an overview of what this committee that is being formed or is going to soon meet to begin to plan out the strategies for selling this to the community,
Well,
the promotion of it.
do I need to turn this on? Is it on?
It's
No.
pretty good.
Well, John, we have a group primarily made up of people that were on the steering committee, and we want to enlarge that as much as we can to bring in as many people from the community who feel like this is a benefit to the community as possible. So we have a small group of about 8 people right now that are working to put together a group of between 30 and 40, maybe 50 people who will generate interest in what it is we're trying to do and basically sell this to the community. I think it's important that the community gets as much information, and the newspaper has done a fantastic job in the recent couple of articles of kind of explaining what the project is and what the needs are. And just in talking about some of the even phasing things, we'd be looking at $15 to $18 million just for phase 1. That's to take care of the current facility and an addition. So we're talking about a lot of money just for one phase, and then you don't have a full you don't have a full complement. You don't have a full building. You have a partial, and that doesn't take care of the needs of the community. So that's why we went without phasing. And we get it. It's a big chunk, but that's a big chunk of concrete we're dealing with. And so back to your question, we have a small group. We have funding.
Good.
And we will be meeting actually tomorrow with a second meeting or so. And we have met with the Chamber Public Policy Group, and we'll be meeting with the Chamber of Commerce next week. And then we'll just be kicking off to meet with as many community groups as we can to explain how we got here and to share the vision with where we're going. Does that answer your question?
Sure does, yeah. Just as a point of clarification, John, spend a minute just to clarify for the benefit of the public that actually no tax dollars will be used in any way to promote the passage of the sales tax.
That'd be correct. All the money that Bob Fee referred to is probably raised money.
All private money, yes.
And Bob, do you have anything else regarding this issue that you'd like to? I was just on the verge of asking if there's anyone in the audience that would like to address the council on this as well. Anything that's not been said that you'd like to bring up?
I think John's done a great job in explaining it, laying it out. I've had a couple of conversations with several of you, and we certainly understand the concerns and heard loud and clear yesterday at the public policy meeting at the chamber about some of the concerns with the sales tax. And the question I went back with is, then what would you do? And we own a building. We've owned it for 62 years. We've kicked the can down the road for a long time. The last renovation to that building was in 1981 or 1982. That's a long time ago. And to put it into comparison, Allen Fieldhouse is 2 years younger than our sports arena, and it's undergone multiple renovations and additions. Different deal, I understand that, but we're still dealing with an old building, and we own it. So it's kind of like having a house that you've lived in for 50 years. The carpet looks fine to you, but when somebody else comes in, it might look like it's 50 years old. And I think we have to understand that as a community and hopefully decide and determine that we want to put our best foot forward, always. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I think that was a good point, Bob. If we don't do this, then what do we do? Allow the building to become completely functionally obsolete in such an important corridor. So thank you for your time on this.
Do we have anyone else in the audience that would like to address council? And is there anything else from council that needs to be addressed?
Well, I would move to approve staff to proceed in working out a bond schedule and bond coverage, as well as proceed with the preparation of preparing an ordinance for council consideration at the January 20th, 2015 council meeting to formally place the sales tax proposition on the April 2015 general election ballot.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I would second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Bush,
Yes.
Soldner,
Yes.
Pyros de Carvalho,
Yes.
Dave Line.
Yes.
Prowett.
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 7B, consider request for amendments to Chapter 27 zoning regulations.
Good morning, City Council members. Janet McCarron, Director of Planning and Development. The case before you is consideration of some amendments to the city's zoning regulations pertaining to parking, screening, and signage in the C4 district. I just want to briefly go through a summary of the changes without reading the entire ordinance. For parking, a summary of the changes, first of all, would change the trigger for compliance with paving. Right now, the city's regulations state that if there's a change in use on a property, if it's a different use, they have to pave it. If it's not paved, they have to put in landscaping if they don't meet our landscaping regulations. And so that's been kind of a fairly large burden for some of the people wanting to build, especially on infill properties. They're wanting to come in and locate in a building, and then are faced with this huge potentially huge parking expense. So the trigger now would be if the new parking requires is additional parking. So that's the first change that we're recommending. The second would be to modify the non-conforming ingress-egress requirements. That pertains specifically to head-in parking. And particularly in the older portions of town, there's parking that's head-in, which means you just you pull in off the road and you back out into the road. We don't allow that anymore, but there are some places where that is grandfathered, and this clarifies that they could reuse the building. They could continue with that head-in parking, which could be considered non-conforming. That was not really clear in our regulations. It almost appeared as if, well, if you have the head-in parking, you can't reuse the building if it's a change of use. So we're cleaning that up. Also, removing the detailed section pertaining to individuals with parking for individuals with disabilities, because that's already regulated by federal law, and we would be constantly having to update our regulations, so we just reference the federal regulations. Also, providing a variance option for uses that cannot meet parking requirements. So if for some reason, particularly on an infill property, they can't meet the requirements, they could apply for a variance. It really wasn't clear in our regulations whether parking variances were permitted or not. And then finally, and probably what was the genesis for this whole round of amendments to the parking regulations, would provide a exemption for industrial uses for a change in use. So on an existing industrial property, and I have a photo there of an industrial property where there's no paving existing, they could reuse the building and not have to pave. Our current regulations say if it's a change in use, and we have 300 use categories, so almost anything is going to be a change in use. If it's a change in use now, they would have to pave. But under the proposal, if it's in an industrial zoned area, they would not have to pave the parking lot. They would have to pave, however, if it was expanded. So if they add on to a building, or if they build a new building, then the change in use, the paving requirement would be triggered. And that's how our current regulations read. And I just wanted to go through a couple of the parking lots primarily on Halsted. We have an area there that was annexed into the city. A lot of that development occurred before it was ever in the city. And you can see there's several unpaved parking areas that paving these, if they get a new tenant in there, paving it would cost more than the value of the property. So the option is to say, yeah, you have to pave it, or you can't really use the property. And so we're kind of between economically, it's just not feasible. A couple more places there. The next set of amendments pertains to mechanical screening, or the screening of mechanical equipment. And this allows for an exception to be granted by the Board of Zoning Appeals if there is a case where there's some kind of physical or topographical constraint that prohibits a new development from screening their mechanical equipment. We don't require existing ones to screen, but if it's something new, the city's zoning regulations changed in 2011, and that has been a requirement since that time. And I just have a couple of samples to show you. This is a property that's not screened. There's Aaron's, it is screened. You can see the difference in the appearance of the building. Here's another screened example, First National Bank. There's an unscreened example. It's up on Quick Shop up on 30th. And Qdoba is screened. So that's our recommendation, is that in cases where there's something about the property, either it's very large or it's remotely located or it's industrially zoned or something, that the applicant could apply for an exception. And then finally, the last set of amendments that are being recommended are for signage. And this set of amendments came about primarily from the mall. The mall, as you know, has a new owner, Rockstep Capital, and they are hoping to install new signage along their frontage on K61. So you can see 2, 3, and And 3B would be new signs. They would be center identification signs. Our current regulations only allow those to be 200 square feet and a maximum of 20 feet tall. What Rockstep has asked is that they be allowed to put in 30 feet tall signs that are 250 square feet. So staff's researched this and also talked with Luminous Neon and some other entities and believe that it would be in the city's best interest to allow a little bit bigger sign. I did want to note that if, under our current regulations, they could put in individual signs that advertise just one business, pole signs, they could have 14 of them. So we feel like three a little bit larger signs would probably be preferable to 14 pole signs, each one advertising a different business. And this Planning Commission did consider these amendments to the zoning regulations on December 2nd, and they recommended approval. I can stand for any questions you might have.
Jana, I just wanted to note that I'm very pleased to see that we've inserted some flexibility based on feedback from our business community. It's important to have proper zoning standards, but this is, I think, a move in the right direction in establishing a lot of trust with our business community. So thank you for working on those.
I agree with Jade. I mean, as you were stating, you know, it just doesn't make sense economically to pave a lot that costs more than the property itself, and we don't want to basically end up with just a bunch of abandoned properties. We have enough of those. Do we have any other questions for staff?
I'll make a motion, we approve the amendments to the zoning regulations as presented by staff.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Bush.
Yes.
Soldner.
Yes.
Tyros de Carvalho.
Yes.
Dave Line.
Yes.
Crowett.
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 7C, consider contract with SCED for administrative services for a CDBG Economic Development Grant for Mervis Railcar Repair Facility.
Well, good morning again. Jana McCarran, Director of Planning and Development. And this is a little bit different kind of item for me. It's not a planning item. As you're probably aware, the city has been working, and the Chamber of Commerce has been working with Mervis Industries to develop a 100-acre tract of property located in Salt City Business Park. And as part of the incentive package for Mervis, which is a $25 million project, the city has agreed to apply for a CDBG grant for economic development. The grant would help to pay for some of the infrastructure cost, and it would be up to a maximum of $750,000 is the maximum amount we can apply for. Because we don't really have the capacity on staff to administer a grant of that type, we have requested that SCED, we sent a request for proposals, and SCED replied and said, well, we would like to bid on this. We can administer that grant for you. So this item is just to enter into a contract with SCED for administration of a CDBG Economic Development Grant in an amount up to $750,000. I should note that if the city were not, SCED would be the applicant, they would apply on the city's behalf, write the grant proposal. If we're not successful, we would not owe any money to SCED. If we are successful, the city could owe up to $17,000 depending upon how the whole grant's written and the matching funds that could come out of that. And just as a side note, the Mervis project is on our Planning Commission agenda tonight and our Subdivision Committee agenda tomorrow night, so that is making its way through the planning approval process. Okay. If you have any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Does this motion need to be amended to 750?
Well, the agenda, I think, went out, said 75,000. It
Yeah.
is 750,000. So,
And that would, the 17 would come out of the growth fund.
yes.
Do we have any questions for staff, or do we have a motion?
I'd move to approve a contract with SCED in the amount of $17,000 for the administration of a CDBG Economic Development Grant in an amount up to $750,000.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Bush.
Yes.
Soldner.
Yes.
Pyros de Carvalho.
Yes.
Dave-Line.
Yes.
Prowett.
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 7D, consider safe routes to school Graber design agreement.
Good morning. My name is Brian Clennon. I'm the Director of Engineering. In June of 2014, the city applied for a Safe Routes to School grant to help fund sidewalk and ADA ramp improvements near Graber School. I believe you have a map in your packet that shows the location of those proposed sidewalks and also those ADA ramps. Well, in October, we were notified that we were successful, or we were selected for that project. The project is estimated to cost $284,000, with $200,000 coming from the Safe Routes to School grant, $10,450 coming from a Hutchinson Community Foundation grant, and then the remaining $73,000 is coming from the city of Hutchinson. And we have budgeted for that amount in the 2014 and 2015 CIP. So the issue at hand is an agreement for $20,067 with Lochner for the design of the proposed sidewalk and ADA ramp improvements in this area. And staff is recommending Lochner for this project because of their knowledge of this particular project. They completed the phase 1 study around the Graber School District, or around the Graber Elementary School. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Brian, on our map, the little, the yellow indicators, is that just indicating intersections? Is that something that's actually getting improvement?
That's just a crosswalk,
Okay.
is what that
Okay.
indicates.
Okay.
Some pavement marking.
Would this be completed in time for next school year? Or?
No.
No.
It will be completed by the fall of 2016.
Okay.
Okay. Do we have any further questions, or do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion, we approve the Safe Routes to School program as presented by staff.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Bush.
Yes.
Soldner.
Yes.
Pyros de Carvalho.
Yes.
Dave-Line.
Yes.
Prowett.
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 7E, consider stormwater utility study findings.
All right, Brian Clennon, again, Director of Engineering. In February of 2014, the city hired CDM Smith to complete a stormwater utility study. And we had 3 goals going into this particular project. The first was to involve some key stakeholders from our community to assist us, city staff, in determining what our stormwater program should look like. The second was to identify the costs for that stormwater program. And then the third was to evaluate several different methods on the best way to fund that stormwater program. And with us here today, we've actually got several folks from that stakeholder group. We've got Chad Mathis with Hutchinson Hospitals in the audience, Keith Schrader with the Kansas State Fair, and also Harley Macklin with the Planning Commission. They were all part of a 14-member, what we called SWAC committee, Stormwater Advisory Committee group. We also have our consultant from CDM Smith. We've got Mike Beeshold and Scott McClellan, and they drafted the stormwater utility study report, and they also facilitated those 6 stakeholder meetings. And they're here today to present the findings of that study.
Good morning. Thank you, Brian, and good morning, Mayor Prowett and council members. I'm Mike Beesold with CDM Smith. I'm the project manager for our firm, and Scott McClellan is our program director, joining me as well. So good to be back. It has been some time. We came here in March and did a kickoff conversation with you in this facility here. We also had a study session in October. I think the majority of you were there, held over at the treatment plant. So we visited with you a couple of times, but this will be the second time that we've had the opportunity to visit here and excited to bring back to you now the findings and the final report. We're going to discuss a little bit about the process that we went through. I know we outlined that for you then, but want to share with you how that went. And Brian's already introduced to you a number of the SWAC, Stormwater Advisory Committee members here in the audience, 3 of which there were 14. And then we want to talk about the findings of the report. And so the packet was rather lengthy this time, I suspect, with a full report in that. So appreciate if you had to download that, and was all in color and rather lengthy. So we offered an executive summary of that as well. So if you didn't have the chance to read the entirety of it, I think we boiled it down fairly well for you, but can get into the details of all the study elements if you would like. The time that we visited with you before, let me make sure I understand. There we go. We came to you with some of the background that initiated the conversation, and these are the challenges that we described, staff described to us at the time. CDM Smith had an understanding of, because we also were the firm that did the Stormwater Master Plan in 2000. First and foremost being the Stormwater Capital Improvement Program needs. This is that long-standing list of projects that are necessary to reduce the flooding like that experienced in 2013 within the city, within the levee walls of Hutchinson. And that amount today, if we were to do the recommended alternative, would be $56 million in capital improvements. That long-standing CIP that is coupled with the challenge of stormwater maintenance. So there's been deferred maintenance, much like many cities around the country. We have aging infrastructure, and stormwater is underground, out of sight, out of mind for the most part. And so we have deferred maintenance that also needs to be addressed. Like many communities of your size around the country, EPA has new stormwater water quality regulations, and most communities see those as unfunded regulated mandates on communities. And so all of these things are leaning towards a growing need for additional resources, funding. And administering all this and doing it relatively quite well is your team of Jeff Peterson and Michelle Silsby and Brian Clennon here. But it's a limited staff to do a whole lot of work, as you might expect when you see these flood events occur. And then there has been quite a bit of work done in recent years with the levee system. So you've got a 2-tiered system operating. You have the levee system protecting from the outside of waters flowing in from Cow Creek and the Arkansas. But internal, this flat kind of bowl area of the city is in need of that $56 million of improvements to improve the size of the pipes and improve those that are in disrepair to be able to convey that water safely through the community. So we looked at what are all the components of your current program, and there are nearly 5,000 inlets and manholes, 72 miles of pipe throughout the city, and again, those are largely the condition of which is unknown at this point. So it's important to understand the condition to be able to make prudent decisions about what your capital improvements program should look like going into the future. 30 miles of ditches convey water throughout the city. As you well know, 28 miles of levees protect from the waters outside from entering the city and do a great job of that. I think it's some nearly $950 million of assets protected, private and public, within the city from those levees. So it's a great investment that you put about $1.2 million of into some design and construction activities, repair activities. That 1.2 million, however, took away from the additional revenues that were coming in from the stormwater program and the increased fees as of recent, because it had been deferred to deal with the levee work. So the CIP still goes relatively unmatched by any funding, and largely there's little known about the maintenance needs at this point of that 72 miles of pipe. And another fact, again, pointing out the aging infrastructures, about 60% of the infrastructure, stormwater infrastructure of the city is now approaching its expected life and greater. So we're exceeding 50 years of pipes and manholes and inlets, and again, largely which we don't know the condition of at this point. So that's all the data behind what we needed to consider about how the program might look in the future and what kinds of funding might be important to bring forward to address and start tackling some of that capital improvements program. And we brought that information forward, which was a key important part of the process, to the stakeholder committee, or the Stormwater Advisory Committee, the SWAC. And you can see here the representation that we had on the SWAC. It's again comprised largely of those who would be significantly impacted by any change in rate or structure, but the representative of the community, and live and work in the community. And this was an opportunity to educate them as well about what stormwater management and the important city services that are provided for stormwater management. Then it's to take their input and see what is the comfort level of the city and how they might move forward to fund these necessary improvements. We did have 6 meetings throughout the summer, so we met with you in March. We were just getting ready to kick those off and make the invitation to all these folks. We started in May, we ended in October. Our last SWAC meeting was October 14th, right after we met at a study session with you all, so they could make some final recommendations and even consider what the future rate might look like to begin to tackle some of these important initiatives for stormwater management. So what's the importance of the SWAC in this process? Well, it's helping the city look at a consensus-based level of service. Again, it's a value-added necessary service that the city provides. And what is the appropriate level of funding to, again, be in compliance with unfunded mandates, but also start addressing that large CIP of $56 million. And the level of services, we've broken it down here. We took 4 primary components of the program, and we've done this across the country for 150 or so different utilities. So these are the 4 building blocks. There's program management, overseeing the funding and the revenue and how all of that happens. The regulatory compliance component, operations and maintenance that's necessary, and then the CIP. And then for Hutchinson, we looked at it a little differently. If you look along the top row here, we've combined program management activities with also the regulatory compliance activities. It's just a large administrative component of the overall program. And then we have operations and maintenance in the middle, and then the CIP on the far right. One of the things that we've utilized around the country and have had some success with and helping communities determine where they're at and where they want to go is this notion of level of service. And here we offered a 1 through 5 option, or rating, or a grade option. And here it's fairly intuitive for most folks what A through F represents in terms of a grade for your program. And as we go from F to A, obviously the cost increased to be at those higher levels of service. And the rigor of those program elements and components are also, for instance, going from complaint-based operations and maintenance activities to inspection-based, and then routine maintenance-based at a level of service B, is the increase in that level of service. What we've highlighted for you in yellow is what we saw as the current level of service in the city for stormwater management. So the city overall, under even its old permit, even with the EPA audit and coming into compliance with that, and now the new permit, that's the next 5-year permit that just came into effect in 2014, you're meeting the minimum. You're generally in compliance with your permit. As for the operations and maintenance, it is a reactionary program at this point, and largely subsidized, I think, by about $160,000. Primarily, most of the activities that happen in operations and maintenance are done by the sanitary sewer crews and their equipment. So there's some subsidy happening right there currently. And then as for the CIP, there's this large CIP that is relatively untouched at this point in time that needs attention. So overall, we gave the program a grade of a D minus. again, it noted at the bottom, it's not a reflection of the good work of the staff and the city. It's just a matter of resources. That large CIP weights the whole thing down. There's a significant amount of flooding that needs to be dealt with, and there's a lot of money that would need to come forward to be able to tackle those projects. So what would be the benefits of having a higher level of service? And first and foremost, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure with respect to operations and maintenance. That reflects on any parts of the system, and that's the same as it is here. It would go a long ways in that second bullet point to reducing the flooding in the city. It won't reduce all flooding. That was not the design of the recommended alternative in 2000 that we provided, but it would address that 100-year storm, or that 1% chance of being flooded every year is what the 100-year storm equates to. It would put you in compliance, certainly with your permit from EPA and the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, and you would have the additional staff necessary to help manage the large growing capital improvement programs and the operations activities that would need to take place that are currently being subsidized by your sanitary sewer crews. So when we met with the Stormwater Advisory Committee, we asked them what level of service would be appropriate, acceptable in the community, and the businesses that they represent, and they offered to us, I think 13 out of the 14 voting gave us a level of service B or greater, B being the majority of them. And you can see here what that would entail. Currently, the entire revenue stream for the program is $530,000 with the current utility. Level of service B would have nearly $30,000 in compliance and program management activities. A bit of that would be related to the growing CIP projects that would be spinning out of the program. More proactive O&M that would take place. Because we don't know the condition of the system, it would be important to first get out and understand the condition of the system before making any significant decisions on projects. And then we have the flood improvements, flood-related CIP, and there is some water quality regulated CIP as part of that level of service B.
Mike, can I interrupt you a minute? Can you
Yes.
back up and just reiterate just what you said in terms of identifying projects
Yes.
for my clarification?
Yeah, so in 2000, CDM Smith was hired to do the Stormwater Master Plan. We identified projects in 5 phases throughout the heart of the city that would address some of the most significant flooding areas.
this one here?
That's correct.
Okay.
So the map that was held up as part of the report was the recommended alternative 5 from the Stormwater Master Plan. And those projects in phases would be done over, at least at that time was proposed over a 50-year period. Now we're 15 years later than when that report was completed. It's important to go back and look at the system and see where the failures are, where the flooding is yet occurring. Are there other alternatives that weren't considered about how to detain the stormwater, convey the stormwater that we should consider now? And part of that would be to get out and condition assess your system and find those key project areas that we need to start tackling sooner than later.
So yet to be identified.
There are projects that I think they need to be confirmed. and
Confirmed,
verified.
okay.
That's right. With that, I can take any questions on the background of the SWAC process. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to Scott, and he'll talk a little bit about funding. Okay, let's talk
I
funding.
think we're good. Good for Scott. Thank you.
Yeah.
He gets the hard work.
Mayor and council members, glad to see you all again. I'll talk a little bit about how we dealt with the funding part of it. The first part, as we said, is what kind of revenue do you really need and what you really want? What is your level of service expectation for the city and the community? The second part of it was, okay, if that's what you want, how are you going to pay for it? So that's when we started looking at the funding component of it. We looked at all aspects of funding that is available to the city and focused on these 3 that you see on your presentation: ad valorem taxes, sales taxes, and stormwater utility fees, all 3 of which you currently have. And I think after a lot of discussion, we focused on the issue of which one of these is related to the service that they're receiving. A stormwater utility fee is a user fee. The more you contribute to the problem, the more fee you should pay. That's the way the fairness was discussed in the SWAC committee. The other two are viable, and we're not rejecting them entirely. However, it's very difficult to get the other two together to make it work. The history shows that for other communities that there generally is multiple sources of funding, not a single one, but multiple sources. So we don't want to reject them all, but the more focus was on the stormwater utility fee, which you already have. The way it works and the logic behind it is this, that the management of runoff benefits the owners and tenants of your community, and that the service was related to the property's contribution to the problem. The more they contribute, the more the service they receive. So the fee should relate to runoff. The more runoff they have, the more service they get, the more fee that they have to pay. And a common proxy for runoff is impervious area. So basically the logic is the customer receives a service from the utility in direct measure to their runoff, which is impervious area. That logic has stood up in courts throughout the United States, and there are approximately 1,800 to 2,000 of these throughout the country, and I believe there are about 30 utilities such as this in the state of Kansas. Here is your current rate structure. You do have a utility fee. Residential customers pay $2 per dwelling unit, and then non-residential customers pay basically a fee based upon a percentage of their total property area. It's kind of a surrogate measure of impervious area, which is 60% of their property size up to a certain point. After a certain point, it's 40% of their property size. The graphic that you see there, the blue line shows that, well, the horizontal axis at the bottom is the property area. The blue line shows the rate depending on the property size. You can see the larger the size, it caps at 600,000 square feet of property size. And the fee is $128 for that. The red line, on the other hand, shows you the cost per acre based on property size. So the larger the property you have, the smaller the cost per acre you pay. The folks that are way at the far left of the graph basically says that if you have a very small amount of property, you pay the most per acre. That makes me nervous. And it basically says that the small guys are subsidizing the big guys. So bottom line is we'd like to, the stormwater utility fee concept works best this way. Most of the utilities in the United States work this way, and that is residential customers pay a flat fee based upon the number of dwelling units. That's the way it is today. There's no change in what you're doing today. The effect is for the non-residential customer, and that's this. If a non-residential customer has the actual impervious area that is similar to 3 dwelling units, well, then they should pay 3 times the amount that the dwelling units pay. That's fair and equitable. It's held up in courts, and that's what we have brought to the SWAC committee. All right. Oops. I need to go backwards. Go that way. Added to that, however, we talked about the idea of offering your customers, non-residential customers in particular, credits for good things that they have done to improve their stormwater runoff from their site. If they have done some things to lessen the runoff expected by the city from their site, then they should get a reduced fee. And here are just some of the ideas that we talked about for a credit system to reduce people's fees when they're doing good things for the city. Here are the user fees in Kansas. You can see where you are at $2. The average in Kansas of the 20, well, there were 27 that we had information on. The average is about $3. a month, and you can see that you're kind of on the low end of that group. This is based on a Western Kentucky University survey. They do one every year, and they survey all the utilities that they can get information on throughout the United States. So what we did is we went through a list of options of what should be a reasonable fee, what should be the rate structure, how should we play this out, how should we pay for the stormwater master plan projects over however much time that we needed to do. So here is just one of the things to look at, that if you look at all 4 components of the stormwater program, program management and NPDES compliance, operation and maintenance, and then 2 levels of capital improvements. The first one is capital improvements that may be necessary to meet the federal permit, stormwater permit. We're a little speculating on that at this point. We're not sure, so we put kind of a budget in there for that of $150,000 a year. And then the flooding CIP for level of service B to implement the stormwater master plan methodically over a period of time. The total amount for level of service B was approximately 3.6 million. And you can see the rates necessary to achieve that. For program management and operation and maintenance, that would be $2.50. That would give you to level of service B, which would be more than, that would be inspection-based and routine-based. In other words, you would actually go and routinely maintain some of the system automatically, not wait until it rains, but it would be ready for the rainstorm event, which is a good thing. That's a good practice. And then by inspection, you'd go and fix the rest of it. Then the question is, how fast do you want to pay for the capital improvement program? That's really what it boils down to. How fast do you want to pay for it? And so we gave them a couple of options. The full rate, you can see if you pay for full level of service B, it would be $7 a month. Then we gave them some options just to look at ideas. If you only paid for 50% of the CIP, then the total number would add up to $4.75. Again, these are just options that we gave them to look at. So let me go through quickly the recommendations of the SWAC itself. They are more than preliminary draft at this point, so scratch off the top of your page preliminary draft. I won't read them too quickly, but the city should strive to level of service B over 5 years. They did not say do it today, but build up to that level of service over time. It should be funded by the stormwater user fee for the existing program and improvements to it. The rate should be based on actual impervious area for non-residential. The stormwater user fee should be based on a billing unit that is 3,120 square feet. That is based on residential properties within your city. And that's defined as 1 billing unit or 1 ERU. Residential should be based on 1 billing unit per dwelling unit. That's the way you're doing it today. So there's no change for residential customers other than if you change the fee. The same is true for duplexes, multifamily, and mobile homes. It would be status quo. The rate structure for non-residential would be based on actual impervious area divided by the number of the billing unit, which is 3,120 square feet. There is the change. That's the major change if you were to go this way. There would be exempted properties, and properties with less than 300 square feet would be considered undeveloped. And that the rate structure should authorize credits. We went through a number of options, but I think the SWAC group would like to consider it further and in more detail, and are willing to continue to consider that should you like them to do so. They were very strong about the fact that this stormwater master plan should be systematically completed. How fast you do it is up to you. It depends on the rate, but it should be done. It needs to be solved. The levee system has been resolved. It's time to deal with flooding within the levee system within your city based on priority. The SWAC is willing to continue after this to help you out as much as possible on the policy. related to the utility and other stormwater activities. And after we met with you in the workshop, we came back and talked to them, and at that point, they recommended the program should start at $4.75 per billing unit. And if you did that, it would generate about $2.45 million per year. You remember that your current utility is about $630,000. So it'd be a significant amount of revenue to your program, which would be mostly turned into capital improvement projects. There would be operation and maintenance improvements as well. All right, let me go back to Mike and talk a little bit. You have any questions for me? We're going to have an opportunity in a minute, I guess, to do that. All right.
So where are we with the schedule? Well, we're on schedule. You can see here in the red, we're in January 2015. Our contract is through March. Our first meeting with you all to share with you the report and the findings of that and the recommendations of the SWAC is today. If you almost to the bottom there, see 2 council meetings offered, a couple up from task 600. The next would be, hopefully with your authorization to move forward with implementation, would be to visit with you again in March 17th with an ordinance that spells out the new rate structure and agreed upon rate moving forward. The components here in the scale of these building blocks of the triangle aren't reflective of the time necessary, but just to demonstrate where we're headed. The first building block at the bottom is where we're at. We've looked at the financial, technical, stakeholder input. That's the foundation of moving forward. This point forward over the next several months would be to rectify parcel data that we've been working on to get the exact impervious area and rectify that with the account numbers to make sure we have a viable billing system in place moving forward. Talk about the legal and other credit policies that we had shown you earlier. There weren't a lot of definition to them, only that they wanted to see credit offered to those who were doing good things for stormwater. So those yet have to be defined. Develop the ordinance and then look to work with the city in terms of training and such to make sure that the data are kept current as new development comes in and or additions are made, that the impervious areas are reflective moving forward. And we would be moving forward to be done by the end of March. One of the key components that we heard when we met with you all in a study session was, what are we doing for outreach beyond the stakeholder group? So certainly the stakeholder group is to be reflective of those stakeholders most impacted by a new rate structure and fee, but also reflective of the community as a whole. But was there also going to be a larger, more broad-reaching public outreach as well? So we've worked with city staff, Brian, Jeff, Reg, and Michelle here to provide a communications plan moving forward so that we can do the appropriate outreach. We've been working on fact sheets to describe all of this. Worked diligently in crafting the memo for today's meeting as well to make sure it is reflective. And I would echo an earlier comment made on a different project about the newspaper also fairly representing the work that's been done in October and again here, I think an article just a couple of days ago. So they're helping get the message out there about what the issues are and what the need is. Updating the website to reflect all the latest information and findings. We're looking to have a public meeting. I believe right now it's scheduled at the library on the 19th, a Thursday of February. And Brian, I think we had it from 3 to...
We haven't set the time.
Okay. So we're looking towards the 19th of February. So a public meeting is in the works. Also offering a speakers bureau, you can see at the bottom of the communications considerations. And then specifically reaching out to those that have the largest impervious areas that would be most impacted by the new fee and rate structure to make sure that they have an opportunity to see what that impact would look like and have the opportunity to visit with city staff as this ordinance moves forward. So those are the next steps over the next several months. If there are any questions, we'd be glad to try to answer them.
I had a question about credits. You mentioned that those are still in the works.
Yes.
I thought I had read something in the report that indicated that businesses may be able to receive up to 85% credit. Was that just a preliminary recommendation, or is
Correct.
Okay.
It was a preliminary recommendation. The exact percentages and how it's achieved and the process is something we need to work out. But
Okay.
it could be as high as that amount because that's the capital improvement and operational maintenance portion of the fee. The rest of it is program management, which you
Yeah.
receive kind of no matter what.
I just think it's important to note that the point of this isn't to just create a new revenue source. It's to deal with the flooding issues, and those businesses that are doing their part will absolutely receive credit for that. So.
Well, Scott, you might talk about, because one of the big things, I don't know how many years, but now with new development, we require the,
Detention
drainage
pond.
studies and
Yeah.
the ponding, and that's
Yeah.
a significant improvement. Those types of improvements that have been done recently, I think would qualify for significant credits. You might talk just a little bit about that.
Exactly. There are two components that we're working with here. One is the amount of runoff that they have or volume of water that they get off of their site. And the second is the treatment of it. And you can do each individual. You don't have to do them together. The point is, folks who are reducing the volume of water that's coming off their site as a requirement of your code, and sometimes even beyond that, we want to give them a credit. We want to recognize that they're doing a good thing. It's hard to do that with a tax. It's hard to do that with some other method of payment. But this way we can. So we're strongly encouraging that. And I also think it makes you more legally defensible as well. We'll also suggest a component related to water quality. When they're improving the runoff quality that's coming off their site, they also are doing something to the benefit of the city. Therefore, they should reduce the amount of money that they have to pay. And the idea is to create a manual to help people figure out how to do that, and a process not to make it onerous, but at the same time, we want to make sure that if they build something properly, they maintain it properly as well.
Okay.
So my assumption would be to get 85% credit back, you'd have to be really top notch on your retention and your water treatment, and
Correct.
so I guess it's a goal to strive for.
I realize this is a very, very long-range initiative of the city, and it's been discussed for many, many years, and certainly long overdue. But I noted my notes back on December 18th of 2013 when I sat in on the RFQ interviews and so on. And I don't want to get ahead of things, but just get your comments on, there was a comment made by you guys about the potential of this new ERU rate potentially being sunsetted. Do you ever see this being sunsetted?
We see it sunsetted in two ways. One is generally where it has to be completely readopted after a certain period of time. That's what I mean by a sunset in one way. That means that you work it for a while and figure out how it's working. Is it improving the community? Are things getting better, and so forth and so on? And then you readopt. It'll die unless the commission or council readopts it. The second way to look at it, it's kind of a sunset, is that a forced reevaluation of the program without it falling off a cliff at that point. It would continue to go on as is, but after a certain period of time, you are required to reevaluate the program and to see if it's working, to see if it needs to get better, seems to need, if it's too much, it's a possibility. Communities do one of those two things. Sunset it, in other words, kill it unless it's readopted, or just force a reevaluation at a certain period of time.
So this would be sometime after the first 5 years or longer term than that?
Your call. Your call. I think the maximum the people that I've seen around the country is 5 years.
5 years?
Yes, sir.
But the actual implementation of the improvements, all the $56 million, is a 25-year process?
It's a significant process. Yes, it is 25 years. It's quite a bit of time. You could do it faster, but that means you have to generate more revenue.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah. We're not willing to go the Prairie Village route, I don't think. But like you said, we're already 15 years behind, and this is something we get an awful lot of feedback about when it's raining. And nobody really wants to talk about it when it's not, but significant property damage in the last few years and many, many calls about these issues, so.
Right, and I think as I was reading through this, that was a thought that came to mind is, the only part I'm struggling with is how much it would go up. I'm trying to justify, well, you know, is there any in-between ground to still do something? And of course, if people start paying at a higher rate, the expectation level, of course, goes up. And the expectation becomes, well, then I should not see any flooding of my property. And so how fast can we make that become a reality for some of these folks that have had situations where the water is pouring into their homes and that type of thing? So if something like this is implemented, and I realize we're maybe talking literally 25 years down the road, would the expectation be that in a 100-year flood event that those homes that currently are becoming flooded would not see that our drainage systems would be good enough to handle it? Or would that still be a rare enough occasion that we would still see flooding?
Yeah, the level of design standard from what we did at the Stormwater Master Plan would be the 100-year event, or that 1% chance of happening every year. So the system improvements that are reflected in there, the costs are of that standard of care, which is pretty customary around communities. 2013, we estimated was around depending where you were in the city, around a 100-year event. The 2007 was that and above, 250 to 500-year event. It was a big event, depending where you were in the city. That standard of care would not be fully handled by an improvement to the system. That's kind of the Noah's Ark rain event that could happen. I think it's important to note again that the CIP, as you're describing, the full amount to fund that level of service B was around $7. The Stormwater Advisory Committee recommended $4.75, or 50%. And so over the next 5 years that they kind of envisioned out forward would be to identify what are those bang for buck projects that are out there that get at the heart of the biggest amount of flooding sooner than later. And from that point, more data are available from your condition assessment, operations and maintenance team that is out there looking at in the field to better define projects to build upon those first big hits to the flooding situation.
The other factor I want to add is that there's sufficient revenue in here to start replacing some of the older facilities. And what we certainly don't want to do is to get out there and start building these new facilities and then have the old stuff collapse and not have the revenue to start dealing with that at the same time. It has to go on together. So this is a methodical way of making both of those things happen as we go.
Well, as Jade pointed out, this is something that seems to be a very reoccurring topic with people, and something that you know, it's hard to think of the $475 a month, but if you suffer any flood damage, that cost is absorbed quickly in the loss of property and hassle that you may incur. Are there any other comments or questions?
I had a comment about the public meeting. Will that be scheduled at a time that a lot of people can come to, or do you plan to have more than one? Will there be one in the evening? I don't anticipate a lot of people going, but I definitely want them to have that option.
Yeah, I was thinking of an evening public meeting on that
great.
Thursday.
Great.
Yeah, at the library.
Thank you.
Question here regarding, and Brian, this may be a question to you, that there's a bullet point here saying additional staff to manage the stormwater management program. What do you envision here in terms of staffing requirement levels?
You know, I do anticipate needing additional staff. At this point in time, I don't know how much additional staff would be needed. I think what we need to do first is do an overall assessment of the stormwater system and see how much maintenance needs are out there. And then we also need to identify those big projects that we'll be doing first, and that's going to take staff to administer and manage those projects as well. So at this point in time, I don't know the additional staff that's going to be needed on the maintenance side or on the project management side, but I do anticipate some additional staff.
contract staff or FTEs?
No, that would be full-time
Full-time,
staff.
okay.
Yeah, full-time staff.
The
And
cost
primarily
would
on
be
the maintenance
absorbed.
side. Of the
Primarily on the maintenance side.
on the maintenance side of the system.
Okay.
Those folks going out and cleaning.
Sure.
Or repairing, or replacing inlets.
But that would be paid for by the ERU.
Yes, it would be paid for by the stormwater utility.
What has been some of the feedback with the, amongst the stakeholders and the general community of businesses?
Well, from the stakeholders, their recommendation, I think, speak volume for.
Because we had some of our larger
That's right.
businesses in there.
That's right. And, you know, it was a long process, and they did commit a significant amount of their time to really learn about our stormwater needs and what the stormwater program should be, and helped us define what that program should be. As far as other businesses, I haven't heard from them, but we haven't done a big public information campaign yet. That's the next piece that we'll be embarking on, if we get authorization to begin implementation. You bet.
Just to add something, I think that they actually kind of, a number of them expressed that they wanted to go faster on this capital improvement than what ultimately was recommended. They thought that that was a need that would benefit them. They recognized that yes, it's more money that they have to deal with, but at the same time, to deal with flooding in the city is an important thing that affects them, and that they wanted it to happen, and to a large degree, many of them wanted it done faster than we ultimately said today.
You had mentioned, Brian, I think it was you, identifying the major projects, and I thought I read some phasing already in here, so is that just preliminary? We're gonna reevaluate our priorities?
Right, that is a good start, and that will be where we start, but those are
Okay.
very general projects, and we're going to need to fine tune those recommendations.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have anything further?
Do you think there might be anybody from the public that'd like to comment?
Yeah.
There may be. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address council on this or has any questions for the presenter so far?
Good morning. My name is Denny Steckline, the manager of the State Fair, and we recognize the need for events like this. 15 years ago, we did the same thing with our facilities. It's important, it needs to happen. I may just express from our standpoint, we're one of those big ones. And just the rough numbers we penciled out when we got the number of potential ERUs, I mean, ours is over 1,000. So we're looking at close to 5,000 a month in stormwater fees, from 128 to 5,000. And if that were to go into place, especially in 6 months, July 1st, I mean, that's one of our big concerns with that is, you know, budgets have been set, and I know that's probably the same for a lot of the commercial users. So maybe the timeliness of phasing into it or something, some consideration for that. Again, we recognize the importance of this. We know we have a lot of real estate. We know we retain a lot of water. We have a racetrack that becomes a lake when it rains, and we call it our retention pond. So, and we recognize
can you
too
drain
the
it over
opportunity
to
for
help?
credits. And it's too early to know what that can mean, but I just wanted to put that out there as far as, from our standpoint, how sizable an impact and how soon that impact would happen. So,
Thank you. I'm glad you pointed that out. Do we have anyone else in the audience that would like to address council?
John, I actually received feedback on that yesterday too. I'm so glad you brought that up, Denny. Is there a way that we could push off implementation of that new fee until?
Yes,
the next budget cycle?
actually, I think when we talked about this early on before the committee even got together, there was some conversation that would be in effect January 1 of the following year, which at that time would have been 2/16, and not I think the committee did recommend July 1 of this year. And part of that thought was, as was mentioned, just budget cycles of everybody and timing. So, early on when we first started this conversation, I recall a conversation about that at the start of a calendar year. I know everybody has different budget cycles, but most of them are probably on the January 1 cycle. So that is totally a council decision. Now, granted, we lose 6 months of revenue and things, but I think that's certainly a legitimate consideration as you go forward.
Give people time to plan.
Right, I was gonna say, as Denny pointed out, I mean, that's a very significant budget increase for
Yes.
them to absorb
Yeah.
mid-cycle.
And there are many, I say many, there are a lot of like state fair properties and, hospitals and clinics and big box stores that will have that same, that same impact, but maybe not as large as what was mentioned there, but.
Right,
they
but
will be-
proportionally,
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we've exhausted our questions. I don't think we have anyone else left in the audience that would like to address us. Do we have a motion?
Would the motion need to be amended? Or was the recommendation of staff to implement in July, or is this just the findings of the study? This is an action.
You might address that, Brian, what you're looking for today.
Right. Yeah, I think the recommendation would have to be amended. The SWAC committee did recommend the July 1st date, so if the council was interested in moving that to January 1st, then the recommendation would need to state that.
Okay, so that'd be January 2016.
And again, the SWAC has recommended an ERU of 475 per month, per ERU.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone that would like to make a motion?
Trying to figure out how to phrase it.
I'll make a motion that we approve the recommendations of the SWAC team as presented to council with the requirement that the implementation date of the funding commence January 1st of the year 2016.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Bush.
Yes.
Soldner.
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho.
Yes.
Daveline.
Yes.
Prowett.
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 7F.
A year.
Consider remediation well system use and property access agreement.
Morning, Don Kochi, Superintendent of Water Treatment Systems for the City of Hutchinson. This item is for approval of RW4 remediation well access agreement among the city, Textron Incorporated, and the Swanson Family Trust. I would like to point out that we do have two representatives of the Swanson family here with us today. Donna Swanson and Matt Brock are both here. To give the council a little background on this item, back in 2012, the city's RW3 remediation well was, which is a critical component of the Fourth and Carey groundwater remediation project, suffered a casing failure and had to be went to an emergency situation where the well had to be replaced in order to continue operations. As a result, the city proposed to replace the old well with a new well located approximately 300 feet east of the existing RW3 well. The new well was proposed to be identified as RW4. I don't know if we have a copy of or a map available on the screen to show the audience and the council, but in your agenda packets, if you would refer to this map as an aerial photograph, that basically up in the upper left-hand corner, there is a blue dot. It's identified as the RW4 well system. And this site is actually located just southeast of Hutchinson, just east of the intersection of OB Road and Avenue G. In September of 2012, a prior access agreement was reached by the city with Textron and the landowner, which are the Swansons, and the new RW4 well was drilled shortly thereafter. The 2012 agreement included a provision that if regulatory authorization was granted, that the city would provide water to the landowner for crop irrigation purposes. The current use of water from the RW4 remediation well has the contaminated water from the well sent to the city's reverse osmosis water treatment plant, where the volatile organic compounds, the VOCs, are removed, and then the purified water is then put into the city's public water supply system at that time. The proposed agreement in front of the council today would allow modifications to that existing treatment system by allowing the inclusion of removing the VOCs through irrigation sprinkler aeration. The irrigation sprinkler aeration treatment would be done on the landowner's property. Again, referring to the map that you have, it's the green hashed area shown in the northwest quarter and also a little bit in the northeast quarter of that section 23. The modification to the treatment application would also require approval by the Kansas Department of Health and Environment as well as the EPA. While this agreement does benefit the landowner for crop irrigation purposes, it also benefits the city by reducing water treatment costs at the RO plant, as well as reducing the wear and tear on the RO treatment equipment located at the plant. Essentially, the water coming from the RW4 well is the poorest water quality that we have coming into the plant. It is very harsh on our equipment as far as the RO membranes, the pressure filter operations, cartridge filter treatment systems, and also it requires more chemical treatment of the systems because of this quality water and more backwashing of our pressure filters. So it takes a significant cost to actually treat the particular water from this well. This particular application would approximately allow the landowner to use roughly 267 acre-feet of water per irrigation season, which is about the equivalent to 87 million gallons of water for irrigation purposes, or approximately about 1/6 of what of the total water we pump from that well. It's estimated that the annual savings in treatment costs and wear and tear on our equipment would be approximately between $18,000 to $19,000 per year. I would also like to add that the duration of this agreement will coincide with the duration of the groundwater remediation project. If the groundwater remediation project should last fewer than 20 years, the city would then provide assistance and support to the landowners to acquire a term permit from the Division of Water Resources for the remainder of that 20-year period to basically help them cover their investment. At this time, if you have any questions, I would like to go ahead and try to answer those.
So basically, the remediation will just happen on site through this new mechanism?
A portion of it. This presents a very unique opportunity for a remediation project that would be involve both agriculture and a municipality, which is very unusual, and it hasn't been done in the state of Kansas. I'm not sure if it's been done outside of the state of Kansas. This type of treatment through irrigation, aeration, has not been done, to my knowledge, in the state of Kansas. It has been done in Nebraska successfully, and that's what we're kind of using our model for this particular project, if it would be approved.
When are you expecting approval from the KDHE? If that
Well,
comes
this
in?
was the first step.
Mhm.
If we would get authorization here, we would then proceed and take the design plan that would be completed, as well as the project proposal to Kansas Department of Health and Environment, hopefully within the next few months here. At that point, it's basically up to KDHE and EPA as well to decide whether they would authorize it or not. They have been very supportive verbally about it because of the uniqueness of the project and the way and the benefits it would provide to both parties. And so I think it was, I'm pretty optimistic about the next steps after this. As far as the timeline, when you're dealing with state agencies, your guess is as good as mine.
I have a question. I'm not quite sure how to ask it, Don. It's my understanding that irrigation amounts, the amount of water that a farmer can pump for irrigation is very tightly controlled.
Mhm.
So this would not impact whatever the Swanson's allocation is if they have other irrigated places, right?
Now
This would be totally independent?
Exactly. This is
Okay.
independent of their other operations.
Okay.
The quantity of water that actually currently is authorized for them to do this, that part has already been approved by the Division of Water Resources
Okay.
to use this water for irrigation. It's actually for remediation
Yeah.
with a byproduct or a secondary treatment or secondary use of irrigation has already been approved, but it is limited to the city's existing water permit structure, so really
Okay.
no additional water is permitted under this proposal.
Okay.
Don, are there other remediation wells that are within our system that there would be a similar arrangements?
This particular well pumps at a continuous rate of 1,000 gallons per minute, 24/7,
Okay.
365 days a year. The other wells we have do not have that high rate. They're only about 350 gallons per
see.
minute tops, which would not be enough for a large capacity type irrigation systems.
Okay.
For those particular wells.
Right.
So this would probably be the only candidate.
Right.
So does it limit at all the types of crops that they can grow? I mean, do these contaminants show back up into the crops?
Well, stepping back here on the contamination, the issue with this water and the harshness on the water treatment plant is not the VOC contamination that's in the water. That is actually relatively low at this point, but it's still there, needs to be treated. The VOCs will be removed from the aeration process from the sprinkler irrigation system before it ever hits the ground and reaches the crop. The problem that we have with the water quality is the mineralization of the water. It's extremely highly mineralized, high chlorides, iron fouling that it causes problems with. Those are issues that can be dealt with less problem on an irrigation system than a water treatment facility.
Okay. So we're not spraying toxic chemicals?
Correct. And there
Well,
would
I mean, you know.
There would be efficiency tests and done during startup to make sure everything is working properly before the system could go fully online.
Okay.
Well, appreciate the investment that they're making, and I hope it works out. I would move to approve the recommendation of staff to approve the proposed agreement with Swanson's and Textron, Inc., authorizing the cooperative project to proceed.
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Bush.
Yes.
Soldner.
Yes.
Pyros de Carvalho.
Yes.
Dayblind.
Yes.
Crowett.
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 7G, consider legislative issues for 2015.
Mayor and council, annually, we've adopted a legislative statement prior to the start of each legislature. And really, what we try to do is identify specific issues that we were really interested in the coming year. We've also taken a look at including the annual statement of policy developed by the Kansas League of Municipalities. And so this year in our statement, fairly simple, a couple issues we've identified are the proposal to move city elections from April to the fall election year. That was talked about last year. We've also included some language that deals with protection of the Special City County Highway Fund, that those monies don't get diverted to help balance the state's general fund, which I think is going to be a significant issue for us this year. So those are just a couple issues. Talking to one of our legislators, you know, I made the comment that it's going to be a big year, just budget. That's going to be what you're going to focus on. And the comment generally is that we'll deal with that in April. But between now and April, there's a lot of other things we can do. So in a joking way, so they keep busy with little things like moving city elections to November that, you know, I'm just not sure what the issues are there. So we got to be careful. And we've got a meeting set up this Thursday, a coffee with our delegation, invited them to just kind of talk about some issues that we're concerned about. And then we'll also meet again with them up in Topeka on February for City Hall Day as part of the league event. So if you got any questions or issues that you'd like to add to that, but generally we like to just kind of hand a statement. And over the years, you know, just handing them the 10-page League of Municipalities statement of policy isn't real effective. I think it's more important that we try to identify specific issues that are of interest this year. And again, some of these issues may develop that we don't know about as a session, you know, unfolds in January. So we'll be paying attention to that.
Who's
So
behind this, John?
I'm sorry.
The city election.
You know,
you know?
I don't know the name. It's a legislator out of Wichita.
Legislator?
Yeah,
Wichita,
out of
okay.
Sedgwick County area. I don't know the name that introduced the bill. And actually, I think we kind of thought it was kind of on the back burner last year, but it's been resurrected again, and I just can't recall the name of that individual. So, and you know, there's all kinds of pros and cons about why people want to do it, and you know, the idea of staying away from partisan, municipal elections and throwing our nonpartisan into partisan elections, and it seems to be all about voter turnout is what that proposal is out of the representative out of the Wichita area. So, but at the end of the day, it's not for us, it's not a financial big issue. It's just one of those things that, again, I think it's kind of that local control. Why is that a state concern? So basically, all we're asking for you today is just to approve this very brief, basic legislative statement that does include the two issues I mentioned, plus the support of the LKM, the League of Kansas Municipalities Statement of Policy.
Do we have a motion as such?
I would move to approve the statement of legislative issues for 2015.
Thank
Second.
you. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Anything you'd like John to? I was going to say set him straight on. Might be a little overstatement.
Might be.
Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Bush.
Yes.
Soldner.
Yes.
Hyros de Carvalho.
Yes.
Dave Line.
Yes.
Prowett.
Yes. Next item.
Item 8, report of city officials.
Nancy, you have anything this morning?
Yeah, hearing the sirens a minute ago made me think of it. The last month, I think, has been a really hard one on our fire department, and so I think we need to commend them for the good job that they have been doing.
So noted. Thank you. Is that all you have this morning?
That's all.
All right. Bob, do you have anything?
No, I don't have anything today.
All right. Jade?
Happy New Year. It looks like 2015 is going to be an exciting one for Hutchinson. Lots of big things coming up.
All right. John?
Nothing this morning.
And I don't have anything, although as I was sitting here, don't know that this is appropriate time, but before everyone's gone, Paul, when do we need to be moving forward with the evaluation process for John?
There will be a request for an executive session, Mayor.
Okay.
When?
All right. Today?
Today?
Today.
All right. I guess that answers
Your,
that.
your timing was good.
Well, I just felt like it normally happened somewhere around here. And I don't have anything else today. Do we have anything from our city manager?
Really have nothing other than in the weekly report, I mentioned a couple meetings, and I've got confirmations back from, I think, the people that want to attend City Hall Day in Topeka on February 4th. And so if you had a change of mind or anything, just let me know. So, but other than that, I would ask for a motion to adjourn to executive session to discuss personnel matters of non-elected personnel and confidential data relating to financial affairs or trade secrets of second parties, at which time no action will be taken.
So moved.
Second?
Until, I should say, till 11:30.
Okay.
All right, would the clerk please call the roll?
Bush.
Yes.
Soldner.
Yes.
Pyros de Carvalho.
Yes.
Dave Line.
Yes.
Prowett.
Yes.
Oh, boy.